Welcome to Collecting Chaos. My name is James, and this could be a very controversial video. The Golden Age of Comics. It is widely accepted that Action Comics #1, with a cover date of June of 1938, is the beginning of the Golden Age of Comics. However, New Fun Comics #1, with a cover date of February 1935, was the first comic magazine to feature all new content. Without this comic, they might have continued publishing reprints of comic strips from the newspaper. And Superman might never have been published in Action Comics #1. This is also the true flagship comic for DC, for the DC comic line, having been published a full 2 years prior to Detective Comics #1. However, I understand that they changed their name several times. I think it was New Fun Comics and New Comics, and then they finally settled on Adventure Comics. So I understand why DC took their logo from Detective Comics. It makes sense, and I'm glad they did. And I fully understand why Action Comics #1 is considered to have kicked off the Golden Age, because the Golden Age was all about the rise of the superhero genre in the early 1940s. In my opinion, though, without the advent of new material published in comics, there might not have ever been a Golden Age. And therefore, the start of the Golden Age, in my opinion, should be pushed back to include New Fun Comics #1. The Silver Age of Comics. Let's flash forward to the Silver Age of Comics. Yes, the pun is intended. While many Marvel files might disagree and flat argue with you, the fact is that Showcase #4, with a cover date of October 1956, is widely accepted as the dawn of the Silver Age. There was a much more important event that happened in comics during the 50s that I contend was the impetus that brought about the revamping of the Flash and the Golden Age of Heroes. In the late 1940s, early 1950s, comics were falling on hard times. Sales were down. Many of the companies had turned to crime and horror to boost their sales. There was a crusade against comic magazines connecting to juvenile delinquency. And in 1953, Fawcett Comics, which featured Captain Marvel, one of the most popular comics and characters of the 1940s Golden Age, after years of being plagued with lawsuits from national periodicals for copyright infringement of their Superman character and the declining sales due to Wortham's campaign against comics, they decided to sell off many of their properties to Charlton Comics, and they closed down their comics division. In 1954, congressional hearings were held about the link between comics and delinquency, and in an effort to thwart outside regulation, the Comics Code Authority was created. Atlas Comics, which would later become Marvel, with their comic magazines cover dated December 1954, first displayed the Comics Code Authority stamp in the upper right-hand corner. National periodicals, Harvey Comics, and Archie Comics followed suit with their comics dated March of 1955, and finally Charlton and their comics cover dated April 1955 added the authority. Dell Comics never displayed the Comics Code Authority on any of their comics. Instead, they published a letter to parents stating that their comics were already wholesome and didn't need outside regulation. They published the Disney and Warner Brothers cartoon lines, as well as several others. And the Comics Code Authority was voluntary, so it wasn't seen as a problem over the years. And for that matter, Gilberton, the publisher of Classics Illustrated and the Classics Comics lines, they never accepted the code either. Of course, with the adaptation of the Comics Code Authority, EC Comics closed up their comics division and changed the format of Mad Comics to the well-known Mad magazine, which was not considered a comic at the time. They were well known for horror and crime comics and really had little choice, as they were one of the targets of the whole Wortham campaign. The end result was that the code forced publishers to look at other genres than horror and crime. It was the late 30s all over again. Comic sales were just nosediving. There was nothing but doom and gloom on the horizon for comics publishers. And then national periodicals struck gold when they revamped their Golden Age Flash character. I believe, however, just as Superman might not have appeared without the publication of new material in comics back in the late or mid 1930s, so too Barry Allen version of the Flash might have never appeared without the adaptation of the Comics Code. I contend, therefore, that any comic from the 50s that displays a Comics Code Authority stamp should be considered a Silver Age comic. Or to put a date on it, any comic with a cover date of December 1954 or later. This would further lessen the confusion of what is a Golden Age and what is a Silver Age comic, since they extended the Golden Age past World War I all the way up to the Silver Age. Or World War II all the way up to the Silver Age, excuse me. Because it would mean that if a comic predated 1955 and has no code stamp, it's Golden Age. If it has a code stamp, it would be Silver Age. With the notable exception of Dell Comics, of course, and their total confusion. Now, the Comics Code Authority had a big impact, bigger than what most people think, because the Comics Code Authority was in effect from 1955 all the way to 2011. Let that sink in for a second. It wasn't until 2011 that the Comics Code Authority was completely abandoned. They revised their standards over the years a few times, but they were in force for a long time and therefore had a significant impact on comics. And that is why I think that should be the start of the Silver Age. And we have some information on the Bronze Age too, but I'm not going to share that right now because what kicked off the Bronze Age, no one really knows. It just sort of happened, you know? I mean, I was collecting comics back in 1969, and people were talking about the Silver Age even back then. But the Silver Age extends past 1969, so go figure. And we wondered, what would be the next? Would Bronze Age be the next thing to hit, or would that be the next Bronze Age? And what would it entail? It was things that we wondered back then when modern comics were, you know, 1970, 1969. Those were modern comics, but we were talking about the Bronze Age even back then. What would it be? It was speculation, but a different type of speculation than buying a comic in the hopes that it increases in value. Now, I know people are going to disagree with me on my views on this, and that's fine. And I want them to, and I want them to disagree and put their arguments in the comments so that I can reply to them. I will not take offense to anything you say. I read all of the comments. I reply to as many as I can, which is pretty much all of them. And I'm not afraid of people's opinions, because that's what they are. They're opinions. This is my opinion. So if you liked what I had to say, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, go ahead and thumb it down. It doesn't bother me either way. And let your friends know about this. Get them in on the debate. Should the comics community demand a change based on what I've presented here? Or should they just let things stay the same as they always have been? It's up to us, the comic community, to make this decision. It's not up to some person sitting in a room somewhere that no one cares about what they do. You know, it doesn't matter. What has been accepted before might not be right. If it isn't right, let's get it changed. If it is right, then we'll keep it the same. And when the hell did the Bronze Age start anyway? And why have we had a modern age of comics that has lasted for over 30 years? I'll address some of those questions later. In the meantime, make sure before you handle your comics, you wash your hands. It's good for your comics, but most importantly, it's good for your health. And have yourself a wonderful day. We'll see you on another video. In the meantime, take care. Bye.